Welcome into the Illini Nation pregame show live from Minneapolis. Bret, Beherns, and Derek Piper here from Illini Inquirer. It is postseason time. We've built up to this all year, Derek, and Illinois coming in now feeling pretty good. The number 2 seed here at the Big Ten tournament. 8 teams have already been eliminated before the Illini even take the court. That is the benefit of being that number 2 seed and getting that double bye to the quarterfinal. How are you feeling about this team overall as we get set for what is truly March Madness now? We've seen some crazy games here in other tournaments. Maybe not so much the Big Ten tournament yet, but I feel like some more madness is on the way.
No doubt, yeah. And that Purdue-Michigan State game was a nice one to kick it off in terms of the intensity. And I know that the collective breath being held by Purdue fans when Braden Smith went down, but have some good battles, including the night session. Of course, Illinois, Ohio State. We'll really get into all that, but I think that there's a decent amount at stake, obviously, for both teams. Yes. Ohio State trying to work their way onto the right side of the bubble. They're squarely on that bubble right now, having won 6 of their last 7. Illinois getting some help from, I wouldn't say they're friends, Duke and Kansas, but they'll be friendly towards them with the losses they've taken down the stretch of this season. Chance for Illinois to jump from the 4 line to the 3 line. I admittedly wondered, after Illinois squandering that opportunity against Purdue on their home floor in the home finale, would a 3 be just unrealistic and probably something that Illinois couldn't get, thanks to Kansas losing 4-5 late and Duke bowing out in their first game in the ACC tournament. It might be a situation where Illinois wins this one and they are on that 3 line. At least maybe 2 wins gets them there. So, I think just kind of context too, we've been used to the double byes with Illinois of late, but there have been plenty of Big Ten tournaments that you and I have covered where we show up on a Wednesday.
We're already gone at this point.
Yeah, we're gone, and Illinois fans are on the corner scalping their tickets and canceling their hotels. So it's nice to be on the other side of that. I know not only covering it deep in the weekend, but for fans as well.
Yeah, one and done last year, and even 2 years ago, right? Indiana upset them in Indianapolis. So that was preluding to the Big Ten title back in 2021. Illinois trying to get to that once again. And ironically enough, Derek, they were a 2 seed back then in 2021 as well. Had that, was it 2 overtime or 1 overtime thriller?
1 overtime.
In the finale of that against Ohio State.
That's right.
Ohio State has fallen a little bit here. Although Jake Debo's got them going here, man. Like 6 of 7 wins. We'll get into maybe some seeding and bracketology coming up a little bit more in the show here as we go along and get ready for the 5:30 tip-off on Big Ten Network from Minneapolis here. But let's just start with this Ohio State squad because they, until Purdue won earlier today, they were tied for the hottest team in the Big Ten. It was Purdue, Indiana of all teams, and Ohio State all had 5 straight wins. And now Illinois is playing one of the hottest teams in the Big Ten.
They definitely are. And we were talking about it earlier today. I don't know if I can remember a situation where a coach gets fired for lack of performance. Looks like a lost season when Holtman gets canned on Valentine's Day. I know you brought that up
right.
earlier. No love at all. And then that team goes on a run and makes the tournament. That could be the case if Ohio State wins today. And they might need 1, maybe 2 more wins. Illinois is, of course, going to try to break those dreams today. But it's just been a squad that they've beaten some good teams. I mean, Diebler's first game, they took down Purdue in Columbus. They've gotten a win at Michigan State. They, of course, beat Iowa yesterday, a team that we know can put up some major offense, and even a win against Nebraska, a team that's played really, really well down the stretch. Ohio State beat them as well. So it's not like they've just kind of loaded up on cupcakes in Diebler's tenure here. They've played legitimately good basketball. I think a big key for them is locking on the defensive side, where you look at about through the point of Holtman getting fired, they were in the 90s nationally in terms of defensive efficiency. Recently, over the last month, they're top 20 defense. So they've got some size, some guys with athleticism. Okpara is a good rim protector. So with the way that they're competing at the defensive end, we know Illinois can score against anybody. I'm not saying that they're going to shut down the Illini, but it's going to be a team that has some ability to make it tough on you. And then a guy like Jamison Battle, who we've seen what he can do, 32 points in Champaign last year when he was wearing the Gophers uniform. Yeah. He's a guy you got to account for at that other side of the ball too.
And ironically enough, their only loss in that time, this being Ohio State, was to this Minnesota squad that lost yesterday in their opening game here in Minneapolis. What's your take so far of it being up here?
I mean, I think it's cool. I do still power rank Indianapolis number one, always number one, selfishly in terms of the travel, but really I just feel like the venue and just all that surrounds it in terms of getting to the restaurants, getting to the bars, if anybody partakes in that. I think it's a great chance to then just kind of have that easy trip for so many different fan bases, which obviously isn't the case here. I will say the surrounding area with the arena, as far as I can tell, pretty nice, and easily walkable and everything like that. Nice arena. So that's the one difference, like in comparison to the United Center, where there's just really not a lot around there. So 8-hour drive, not saying it was my favorite, but I'm happy to be here now that we're settled in. And hopefully on that note, we can settle in for a few days. I'd like to not be on the road tomorrow back to Champaign.
Yeah, Minneapolis, a great city. And it's been really nice weather-wise up here. Temperatures in the 60s. I arrived on Wednesday, and it was beautiful outside. I was afraid that this thing was going to be in the 30s, 20s, snowing. Who the heck knew when they announced this was coming up here to Minneapolis a couple of years ago? And so on that end, it's been really nice. Minneapolis, a great downtown city. Just in the summer, it's a whole lot better than when it's cold. All right, that Illini offense has not been cold as of late. The defense also been good. Where do you want to start? Has the defense been the reason they were able to win, holding Purdue to 77 and Iowa to 61? Or the offense, what's got you most excited about where this Illinois team is at right now coming into tonight?
I think defensively, the improvement that they've made here recently, I know that Purdue in that second half really went bombs away from three. You got to make sure that guys don't get open looks in transition and just you're locking on your assignment. So someone like Jamison Battle, the fact that he's been just one of the premier shot makers in the Big Ten, you got to make life tough for him. But I just feel like the offense is an assumption where they're going to be able to score 80, maybe even 90 on a given night. It's the defense that's kind of the differentiator. Can Illinois be a team that is a tough out in that first weekend, or can they really make a sustained run into the Sweet 16 and beyond? So seeing the way that they rebounded against Iowa, I mean, they only gave up 3 offensive rebounds against the Hawkeyes in that entire game. And then that obviously, when you get stops, allows Terrence Shannon to run and really plays into hand-in-hand defense turning into offense. So I think that's been a nice encouraging sign. You'd like to see that sample size grow a little bit more, especially as we're trying to figure out how much do you trust Illinois defensively going into the tournament. If they have a good showing against an Ohio State team that's very capable and on through this weekend, then I think that the mindset, not only in terms of getting that 3 line, which can make that path more favorable, but you might have a feeling that the offense that's been elite and pairing with a solid defense could be a recipe for a deep and extended March run.
All right, so 22-4 to open up that game against Iowa in Iowa City. That was impressive. But I felt like Iowa still got some good shots. So was it Illinois' defense that did that? Was it a combination of both? How did you feel like that one played out? And then how can that translate as they've had some days off here now, right? They didn't travel till yesterday, Illinois, to get up here. They wanted to stay back in their comfortable surroundings from where they're at. So, like, how does that translate? You're not going to hold teams to 4 points most of the time for the first 8 minutes of the game, but
yeah, I do think they were a little fortunate in some of the shots that Iowa was missing. And even Brad would mention earlier this week that a lot of the looks that Iowa got when they played in Champaign, and Iowa, of course, scored 85 that game.
Yeah.
95 for the Illini was the differentiator in terms of getting the win. But a lot of those quality of looks were there for Iowa in Iowa City. They just didn't make them. I think especially in transition, Illinois had some breakdowns as Iowa got out and ran, and Illinois kind of just getting matched up, stopping the ball. They got to be able to clean that up because that's still something in their profile defensively that has been a pressure point, an area for teams to attack. So they've got to be able to be more solid with their assignments, their effort, their communication. I do say in terms of giving them credit, like I mentioned, the rebounding, it is a big difference where Illinois should be a top-notch rebounding team. When Gary A has that motor revved up and he had 13 rebounds against Iowa. Even Coleman had 10 in that game. So limiting teams to one shot, teams aren't always going to shoot lights out and convert those at a high rate. But if you can make sure that those misses then turn to run outs the other way, Illinois did a really good job. That's something to build on going forward. And I think in the half court too, while I thought the transition was a little leaky, half court was pretty solid. Yep. Tony Perkins 1 for 10 from the field. We know he's talented. And as you look at Bruce Thornton, kind of a similar comp in terms of a physical point guard, plays well in the pick and roll. Terrence Shannon gave Perkins a really tough time, and I think that if he does that to Thornton tonight, Illinois should be in a good spot.
And this game is different, I feel like, than that January matchup. I believe it was the last day in January, second to last day in January there in Columbus. Terrence was just coming back, starting to get in his groove from suspension. And he had a really nice night, 23 points, as did Marcus Domask in that game. But I felt like they were still trying to find their mojo. To me, this is completely different. Yes, Illinois won by 12 in Columbus. But, like, they're 5-point favorites tonight. I feel like that could only be enhanced to the fact that they're not trying to figure things out with Terrence coming back. Like, I look at this game a whole lot different. But the interesting thing is that Ohio State's playing so well, right? Yeah, like they were in a skid back in January. Chris Holtmann still had a job at this point. He has another job right by now, taking the DePaul gig. But like, I don't know, matchup wise, I think it's fairly comparable, and it's always going to start with me against, like you said, how can Terrence guard their best guard, right? Like, he's so long, he's so athletic, and can that defense continue to like get some momentum here, right? I feel like they're going to have, like, whether it's this weekend, next weekend, if they're fortunate enough, the weekend after that, they're not going to be able to score 90 points in every game.
Right.
They're going to have one of these games like they did at Iowa, where they hold a team in the 60s or low 70s.
Right. You just never know if you're going to have a cold shooting night, or just there are some athletic teams out there that can maybe take Terrence away a little bit in terms of his downhill stuff, or have the size to match up with the mask where it's tougher to find the booty ball mismatches. And so, I mean, it's going to be a hard task for anybody to contain Illinois offensively, but there are going to be nights where it's tougher to come by in terms of points. And it really goes back to what Bret has preached throughout the entirety of his tenure here is, what are we and how successful can we be when the ball doesn't go in? What can we do otherwise in terms of toughness, in terms of rebounding, in terms of getting stops, to make sure that that's just not, you know, the bounce of a ball or just a hot or cold shooting night is the difference between us winning and advancing or not. You got to do some other things to make yourself more solid. And also on the note, we know that, you know, you're going to run into some very offensively capable teams out there as you try to go on a run, and you've got to be able to get even just a handful of stops in some key moments to really push yourself forward. So that's been a big part of this recent stretch of just evaluating, can Illinois find that? Because they're running out of time before it's win or go home. And then obviously if it's not up to par, up to standard, that's going to be the end of your season. And really, I mean, Illinois should be better defensively than what they had been for a lot of the season in terms of the athletes that they have, in terms of some of the individual defenders. We talked about Terrence Coleman. We know that him guarding fives isn't ideal, but in terms of his instincts and length and ability to get his hands on the ball, I think Quincy, in terms of the physicality at the four, Illinois long wanted that and finally got him here this year. So I do look at it defensively, but back to your original point, I do think Illinois is very different from where they were at the end of January, because Terrence is a lot more acclimated and obviously on the whole has been on a pretty good roll. But Ohio State playing with a lot of confidence, playing with a lot of motivation of late. And like I said earlier, their defense has really kicked up a notch.
All right, so we're right here in the lobby of the Target Center. A lot of people coming to take their picture. Did you get your picture yet by the big B1G here?
I haven't,
Derek?
No, I was going to take one here with George Mikan.
Okay, right next to you here. We got a little statue. We're in the lobby, and it's a nice center at Target Center. We'll see what the crowds are at tonight. They had the upper deck closed off the past couple of days because they just couldn't fill it.
The old Penn State move.
Exactly. Contrary to that, though, last weekend here with the women's tournament sold out. Unbelievable. Couldn't find a ticket. So that's great to see that the women's tournament is carrying so much weight. Man. Oh, awesome.
I'd say it's all her, but I mean,
I think it's a big reason.
It's a lot.
No doubt about it. NCAA all-time leading scorer for sure. So we'll make sure to get Derek's picture here and report back on that next to the big B1G as we get set and getting closer to tip-off now. Within the hour, Illinois playing Ohio State here at Target Center in Minneapolis. All right, so the offense continues to be pretty good, Derek. And you mentioned the one thing before we go back to this and move to the offense. To me, it's getting stops in key moments. They win the Purdue game if they get a couple of stops late. Thought the defense was pretty good, all things considered. Yes. And Brad had said if you would have told him they would have held the Boilermakers to 77, he would have taken it all day long. Just those key moments, right? Like, you can't let Purdue get off so many threes late, and look what happens. You lose a game. So to me, that's where it's at. Is like, hey, look, you can be good for 36, 37 minutes defensively, but if you can't be good in those key moments, to me, that's where it all comes down in the tournament, right? That's like –
Absolutely. It feels like there's always those games where it's within 2 or 3 possessions, 8 minutes to go or so, and that's where you kind of really start the ball game and see who can make the right plays and come through in the clutch. So Illinois, in closing time, has to be able to get those stops. They did against Iowa. I think once Josh Dix cut it to 4. Of course, it was a 21-point lead for Illinois. Iowa had it down to 4. There was a lot of angst for Illini fans. Are we going to blow another big lead? But from that point forward, I think Illinois made Iowa go 3 for 13 from the field, got those stops, extended the lead back out to 14, and that was all she wrote. The fans were going to the exit. So even at the Purdue game, yes, a lot of people, for good reason, remember the threes that Braden Smith hit, that Fletcher Lawyer hit. But early in that second half, on the note of threes, like, I think that was a defined key moment where Illinois had momentum.
They were up 10.
They were up 10, playing in their home building.
In the second half against Purdue.
Just felt like it was Illinois' night. Yep. Then you double Edey. I'm not saying – not to pivot this and turn that into a whole conversation. We'll maybe have Sunday to talk about whether
maybe
you
on
want
Sunday we can go back to that.
Maybe you can talk about that. But yeah, just in terms of being solid, being good in rotations if
Right.
you're going to be there, but also contesting shooters. And just there can't be a letdown of intensity and focus. I feel like some of that is Illinois' issue. It just seems to be guys taking a playoff here, or just a blown switch, or lack of communication here that just seems avoidable. Some of the things, if Luke Goody's guarding a guy on the perimeter and he gets blown by, I'm like, what do you expect him to do there?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of other times for Illinois where it just feels like it's a lack of engagement or toughness, and Brad's really been hammering them on that the last few weeks, and we'll see if he fully has their attention now that it's postseason play.
And we'll talk about resume and what Illinois certainly has to gain from the Big Ten tournament here coming up. But let's get to the offense, and it has been very good, all right? 4th in KenPom, I think, coming into today. Mm-hmm. We'll see if that improves. It could have certainly go down, but if you're telling me they have a top 5 KenPom offense in the country, that's right up there with 05, 06, and one of the best in the KenPom era, man. Like, this offense is clicking, and I've been in the mindset all along that if the defense is just going to be subpar or mediocre, just go score more points than the other team. Look, is that always going to work? No, but I think if you get a Houston, let's say, if they're the 4 and the 1 and is the Houston, man, like, it's going to be tough. Like, Houston combined and TCU the other night, they scored like 104 points in the game, right? So it's like, it's always going to be that easy, but I'm more into the mindset at this point, Derek, just go outscore the other team.
I mean, yeah, isn't that the object of the game, to have more points than the other team at the end of it? However you get there, maybe it takes 90 to do it. Sometimes if you're a little bit more defensively inclined, you can make it a 60s or 70s game. But I know we have kind of worn out like the Miami comp last year for Miami to go into the tournament and to be lackluster defensively, elite offensively, and put the numbers that they did. I mean, they scored 85 against Indiana in the second round, 89 against Houston, really good and physical, athletic Houston team, put 89, just flat out just had too many shot makers and couldn't be corralled. And then Texas, I should say, there in the Elite Eight, put 88 on them. So Illinois could do that. They're capable of that. I do think, of course, you don't want to only rely on one side of the ball. You want to be able to feel like you can get some stops and not allow teams, especially you think about the first round or maybe even the second round, if Illinois is, say, a 3 seed and they're playing a 6, that a squad that shouldn't beat you isn't hanging around because you're not getting stopped. So it kind of is that way you look at it, but I do agree with you. Let Terrence be aggressive, get him in transition, get him downhill. I love his aggressiveness against Iowa. That was really heightened after a down game against Purdue. Marcus just had a first-team All-Big Ten campaign. It's been amazing what he's done. Quincy to come on, Coleman to shoot 41% from 3. Illinois just has so many different ways they can go at you. And, again, even if they see a 1 seed, say, in the Sweet 16, Elite 8, what have you, they are going to be thought to have a chance because of their offense.
Yep. Completely agree with that. And Quincy, a big part of that, getting back in the double-double category. When they were clicking in January, that was a big reason why was Quincy playing at such a high level. All right, you mentioned a couple of key figures here in this Ohio State team, but let's go back a little bit because Illinois won in January in Columbus. We said they were a completely different team. Agree with that. Illinois, I also feel like a lot different team now. You mentioned Roddy Gale. The Zed Keys, a name that's been around for a long time at Ohio State. A couple other names to watch out for today as we go along here, and some guys that have played well for Ohio State on this run for them.
I think it starts with Jamison Battle, familiar name, obviously at Minnesota, and had 23 yesterday against Iowa. If you look at the stats, when he scores 22 or more against high major teams, Ohio State's 4-0. When he doesn't hit that, they're 7-11. So they're a lot more beatable if he's not into the mid-20s. So
who do you got guarding him?
I think it's going to be Damask.
Okay.
I think he'll probably draw that primary assignment. Now, there have been times where Illinois has said, we want Terrence on a ball handler and then an off-ball guy like a Cam Christie got going. And then at halftime, they say, all right, now we're going to switch that up and make sure that Terrence tries to shut that water off. So I think they're going to start with Terrence on Bruce Thornton. Don't let him get going and pick and roll because he's dangerous there, not only to score for himself, but to operate and hit Apara, who's an athletic runner on the roll, or to kick it out to other shooters. So I think Terrence is trying to corral him and then have Damask, who has done a good job. Like, I thought he defended Peyton Sanford pretty well in both matchups against Iowa. And Jamison doesn't really want to get to the rim a whole lot. He's not going to hurt you with some quick twitch, crazy athleticism. Yeah. He wants to just take jump shots. He wants to shoot the 3. He wants to come off screens. He'll pull up in the mid-range too. So he's a big one. Gale had a 20-point outing against the Illini in Columbus. He's a good athlete, likes to attack the basket. And I think that Evan Mahaffey too, not much of a scorer, but I think he's kind of just he's similar to a Ty Rodgers, is kind of this like X factor, hustle play, rebounder, scrappy guy that transferred from Penn State. He's 6'6".
He's long, as I say.
6'6", strong forward that can make some plays. And one other note, I should mention one thing that's different about.
Hang in there.
A little popcorn in my throat.
Uh-oh. Here you go. Get the big guy some water here.
Yeah.
I think those defensive matchups are going to be key there, too, because it's like, okay, in my eyes, just start with Terrence, right? Let's go from there.
No doubt.
And then you start looking at those matchups and saying, okay, well, which guy can you kind of like plug and play where, and where can you take advantage of that? Because they don't have like, I want to say like I feel like they're all kind of athletic in a sense. They don't have like a big banger post inside that's going to like really kind of present a matchup issue for Illinois.
I agree.
Maybe Coleman can be a little more aggressive, right? Because he can get out and not have to play drop. I don't know. It's just kind of interesting how that matchup goes.
Yeah, I mean, they do have a guy like Key off the bench, but I think that it's kind of a like-for-like matchup with Dane coming in. And
I feel like he's regressed almost.
He has, yeah.
Like he was pretty good his first couple of years, and then not so much here.
He kind of fell out of the rotation for a little while for them, and has had a moment or two. I think it was Michigan State. He had a nice game here 3 weeks ago, but on the note of the bench, that's one thing. You look at 41 bench points for Ohio State yesterday. Devin Royal, Scotty Middleton, those were 4-star top 100 gets for Holtman in this last recruiting class. They've really come on, and they played a lot more late. They've gotten more comfortable. Middleton, a shooter from the outside, also a guy that kind of disrupted defensively on the perimeter. And then Royal, a guy that was an Illinois target, is a 6'6", kind of built like a Ty Rodgers, physical, goes around the basket, rebounds. So they've got depth. That's the thing what I'm looking at with Ohio State. Not to say that Illinois has to match that and play their bench a ton, but I do think that the bench minutes, whether it's Harmon, Danger, Luke Goody, those will be important to kind of match an Ohio State team that may not have a huge fall off when they go to their bench.
Yeah, and we shouldn't mention Dane in that as well. He has played very, very well here as of late. 13 of his 20 last shots in his 5 games here, had 20-plus rebounds in that time as well. His double-digit minutes, 4 out of 5 of those games. Like, I feel like he's giving something to this team, especially defensively, because that was a liability, man. Like, Dane can do some things offensively, but, like, that defensive liability was the reason I feel like he wasn't playing there for a good month.
I fully agree. Yeah, and I give him credit, of course, for sticking with it, being determined,
absolutely.
Understanding that it's the bigger picture of the team, and this team could really use him off the bench, whether it's going to be Coleman that's going to be in foul trouble, or there are teams like an Iowa, Minnesota that play multiple big guys together. So it just gives Brad some lineup flexibility. But I agree. I think that Coleman, while we talk mostly positively about his defense, I think that when he's playing drop, Dane's actually been more effective in that. I think he's more comfortable in that because he's been a natural 5. And I feel like Dane's confidence is heightened offensively, but more importantly, in my opinion, is the activity, like you're saying, defensively on the glass. There's just been some plays here recently that he's made in terms of just like an extra effort play or getting a contest on a shot, a block shot, a rebound that he wasn't making earlier in the season. So very good to see, encouraging for Illinois. I don't know if he's going to be a 20-minute-a-game guy off the bench or anything, but in terms of situation, spots, and obviously if you need to pull the rep cord with foul trouble or whatnot, it's great to have. It's great to have that advantage.
Yeah, and good for him. I'm happy that he is getting a chance to play here in Minneapolis from Brooklyn Park, just a suburb not too far away here from downtown. All right. Did you have any trouble making a pick in this one?
I didn't.
Ohio State's
no.
On a roll, man.
Yeah, I know. I thought about it a little bit. I picked Iowa in the last game.
You did?
I couldn't roll against Illinois 2 games in a row. And
you also picked Purdue to win it all. They were threatened a little bit today.
They were. Took some strays, or they weren't even strays. They were direct shots at me after Illinois beat Iowa, which comes with the territory. I'm all good.
That's true.
Not saying that I'm just getting swayed one direction or another, but I do think this will be a tough game. And we talked about that on the pre-tournament show that we did earlier in the week. It's a tricky game. Ohio State's got a lot of momentum. They're playing a lot better. But I think Illinois understands they have something to gain here too, as far as the seed line movement. Just trying to play their best basketball at the right time. So Illinois is the better team in my opinion. So I'm going to have them slightly edging the Ohio State. I think it's going to be all the way down to the wire, 80-75, Illinois over the Bucks.
All right, I'm thinking in that same kind of realm, 82-76 is the number that sticks out in my head. So I think that's a cover for Illinois. I think this is going to be an 80s game, first to 80 wins. Like I don't think that's necessarily out of the question. I did pick Illinois last game at Iowa, but I said that there was going to be a lot higher scoring. Did not see Iowa getting held to 4 points in the first 8 minutes. That was pretty impressive stuff for the Illini in that. All right, we got some ILL chants here. That's a decent amount of Illinois fans coming in. I'm a little bit surprised by that, but I guess the fans making the trek. Maybe there's some Illinois fans here in Minnesota.
I need to get in line for my picture at the BIG.
You do here. We got a whole line coming here. Look at all these people making the moment here. Just big smiles. Make the moment, Derek. All right. 5:30 tip. Big Ten Network. Illinois, the 2 seed. Ohio State, the 10 seed. We are going to be here to cover it all. I'm going to jump on the newscast here at WCIA in just a couple of minutes. You can join me there to hear from the Illini. And Derek, you guys got all sorts of coverage as always.
We do. 3 keys and a pick. If you wanted to check out my full breakdown of the matchup. Also, I wrote yesterday just about the motivation that Illinois has, and Brad kind of pushing back. I asked him, I didn't say that I was pushing the narrative of like, do you really want to win 3 games in 3 days? Is that a bad thing for a team? I know that of late, the last 3 Big Ten tournament winners have gotten knocked out early in the NCAA tournament. But he said, hey, we want to win every game we can. Anytime we see that other jersey, it's about building that mentality of a killer instinct and trying to get that momentum. So I wrote about that. Obviously, Jeremy, Joey, and I are all here. We're
the crew.
Excited to cover this thing. We'll have you covered from a number of different angles, podcast afterwards, and check out your guys' stuff as well.
We'll do that as well. For Derek, I'm Bret. Thanks so much for watching the Your Illini Nation pregame show. Enjoy the game, everybody. 5:30 on Big Ten Network.